Good afternoon and welcome to the Virtually Speaking podcast. My name is Pete Fletcher and joining me as usual is my good friend, Mr. John Nicholson. John, welcome back from VMware Explore.
Yeah, I'm feeling slightly sentimental. I'm as much as I love my humidity here, I'm kind of missing the desert air. It was nice.
Yeah, you're in like the opposite of Vegas because you're in Houston. So the humidity level where you are compared to Vegas has got to be. Whew. How do you transition?
It's I got 7 tons of air conditioning, so I make do. I survive.
I like it. Well, yeah, I wanted to take some time. John, you and I, we obviously had tons to do at Explore. We'll talk about that on this episode, but I wanted to do a quick recap episode and see what, in case folks actually missed what was going on, we can share a couple of the highlights. And there's no better person to join us on this conversation than Mr. VMware Explorer himself, William Lam. William, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, fellas.
So, William, I know you obviously you were there at Explore. You were on the Gen session and all over the place and tons of sessions. You presented with us on the Adventures in Home Lab session. Man, every time I turned around, you were doing stuff. Man, how are you feeling post Explore?
Exhausted, but definitely recharged from the event. It was a fantastic event. Definitely a little bit more intimate, I would say, but fantastic nonetheless. Great turnout. Like you said, we had a number of different sessions, and I was just running around from customer meeting to customer meeting. I think I had more customer meetings jam packed in those 3 days I was there for than past Explore. The VCF division keynote was a fun one to be able to present on stage with both our VCF general manager Krish Prasad and also one of the engineering leads on the VCF platform. So a little bit of no pressure, right? to talk about a big announcement. So.
Yeah, and you did some great demos, and we will share links on the show notes of the podcast. So be sure to take a look. But the demos that you did for VCF 9 was some really, really interesting stuff. And obviously, we're not going to go through the demos here, but at a high level, what were some of the things that you were demoing on the big stage?
Yeah, we really wanted to showcase, we were really dramatically transforming, our overall products in Sweden, like Chris mentioned, right? Not only did we kind of transform ourselves and reorganize our various, independent siloed organization to single VCF division, but we've taken that same approach to the products and a lot of things that our customers have been telling us. And like folks like Paul Turner, who runs our product management divisions, that we haven't necessarily delivered on some of those promises of, the software defined data center. And really am seeing that, firsthand and not just the speed of it, right? And so what we had demonstrated was some early looks at to VCF 9, not only unifying something as simple as the installer, right? Making it easy for you to deploy a brand new private cloud instance. But more importantly, we want to be able to start with where the customers are at today. And that's really important for me because our customers have gone on this journey with us and they've deployed various products over the years. And being able to go from one environment to another can be very difficult. And so we really are taking that to heart. And we've got all the core components of our SCDC stack within our division. And the team is really looking at how do we not only simplify deploying a brand new private cloud, which many of our customers continue to do, but a larger majority of our customers are coming from some type of environment, whether it's basic vSphere environment, vSphere with ARIA automation, operation, multi-site, different types of configuration. And so we really want to simplify bringing that in so that we can start exactly where you're at today and getting you to that full VCF experience so that you can really start to get the benefit of this unified fleet level management, right? Even if you have a handful of vCenter servers, what you find today is that when you go through things like certificate management, password management, all of these day two operations, they're not great. We know that we have to do them at scale. Obviously, there's some security patches that have been released, and you typically have to go to every single instance. And even though VMware Cloud Foundation, the shipping version, has simplified that and brought all of that into one location, if you have multiple VCF instances, you still have to go to N number of these deployments. And we have some customers that have thousands of these, tens of thousands of these, and all of a sudden this still becomes a very challenging problem even if you've unified it. So we really try to take that a step further and rethink about what does the VCF platform really deliver and really focus on two key personas, right? And so beyond the installer, the new unified installer, we also thought about our infrastructure operator folks, right? So this is really the operation platform. or known as VCF operations. And then further thinking about that is like, why do we have this infrastructure to service all of these rich capabilities of the underlying storage, compute, networking, management, and make that truly consumable? And I would say that that's the piece that I don't think that we've done the best job that we could in the past, right? And really rethinking our VCF automation story, pulling in all these different components that we own within our product portfolio, things like multi-tenancy. This is something that customers have been asking quite a bit, especially for our cloud service providers. So now we're baking that in natively, making it much easier for users to provide a curated catalog of infrastructure services, things that you would find on the public cloud. Ultimately, that's why a lot of users like using the public cloud. But a lot of these enterprises want to have good controls, security, governance around that, and be able to apply policies. And that's what you expect of most enterprises, right? And so really providing those foundational services, going beyond just virtual machines, Kubernetes cluster we've been talking about for quite some time, but what other rich IaaS services can we offer up? Certificate management, application, DNS, object storage, volumes. The list continues. These are the things that we want to enable out of the box, right? And then obviously taking another step further, many enterprises have complex applications that be able to wire that up. And so using things like catalogs, VCF blueprints, you're now able to codify this rich application that's composed of different form factors, virtual machines, containers, databases, right? And again, applying policies, declarative nature, and making it truly, easy and delighting our end users who's consuming it. And that could be the UI, it can be APIs, it can be CLIs, it can be Terraform, Ansible. Really want to enable our customers, our operators, to deliver, a modern cloud experience to their end users based on the needs that they have, right? And so to me, that's really the big shift that we see across that. And obviously we showcase a lot of fleet level management for operators or platform teams, but also how can we enable the development teams at different lines of businesses so that they can come in, start to add value to what they're doing within the organization, and ultimately moving the needle for the business, right? So to me, VCF9 is it's a humongous paradigm shift in terms of how we think about these different products and really pulling it together so that we have this unified stack and ultimately to provide the best private cloud solution out in the market, right? With, again, cost controls, governance, things that you would expect.
So yeah. What I like about this direction is it's not shipping necessarily new products. It's not creating new products. It's using the existing products that are there, finding the gaps within them, innovating on top of them, or building out pretty cool new features like the memory tiering and stuff I'm nerding out on pretty well, to make sure you definitely get more value. But it's not like you're having to go learn a new thing necessarily. And it's a lot of the day two stuff. This isn't stuff that's going to get some analyst really excited about, fixing cert management, password management. But these are things that if you actually use these products, these things matter in terms of, ability to execute and get stuff going and be able to keep stuff patched properly or just, have enough free time in your day not to go insane. This is filling in those gaps and stitching it together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. These are features that is really going to help our practitioners really move the needle and just give them back time, right? And funny enough, I had the opportunity to actually present to some of our analysts, and even some of these day two operations, while we may see them as very basic, they're still a very big challenge. And then to your point, it's not just unifying all of that, right? So I'll give you a good example. Our certificate management story. We all know that every organization has a different policy, right? If you have shorter time windows, it just becomes much more painful when you have to do this and you have to multiply that n number of times. So obviously,
what levels of separation of duties or like the cert times? It's really wild that there is no, like, if you put 20 customers in a room and like, what's your best practices on certs, you would get way more than one answer.
Yeah, and that's perfectly fine, right? Because every organization can have a different policy, but the point is we're not just unifying it, giving you the ability to specify that policy, whether it's like 30 days, 1 week, 1 year. But we also took a look at it and say, you know what, this is extremely painful because even the cert replacement itself, even if we simplify that, there's a downstream impact, meaning if these two components used to talk to each other, I replace a cert, I have to go and retrust that cert. So think about the N permutation combination across all the different components. So we took a look at that and said, you know what, not only are we going to simplify, unify, and make it easy so that you can manage your policy in one place and push that out across your different instances, we want to actually make that non-disruptive. So we're actually giving you that functionality and saying, you know what, you can have replacement of policies based on whatever thing that you've defined in your organization, and we're going to do that in a non-disruptive manner. So to me, that's that additional innovation on top of it.
Not having to
how can we simplify these things, right?
Not having to get the cab to sit there and approve a time window to go bounce a service
Right.
and do things. You may think, oh, it's no big deal having to stop a service temporarily to reboot for a cert. It's only a couple minutes, but there's a lot of people that suddenly they have to get a 1 hour window and they're gonna have to do
Right.
it, in the after hours, and that's just not fun for them or their lives. So
Yeah, you mentioned this a little bit, William, but one of the things that I took away from this event, from the folks that we talked to at Virtually Speaking, from customers, but also to folks on our team, is that there really is a parallel between the aggregation of all of VMware products into what is now VMware Cloud, but also the aggregation internally of of our division of all these different teams working together towards the actual same goals. Like we talked
Yeah.
to VJ, who's like head of products for like, VP of products for like everything inside of VCF. And, and that was one of the things he said, like previously he hadn't really been, over NSX, and so now being in over everything and seeing, oh wait, we need to make sure that these, and it just changes the mindset, which ultimately ends in, product that all works together more smoothly, and gets out the door faster with, with no issues of, interoperability. Oh, you have to wait for the next version for this feature of NSX to work on it. Like none of that stuff happens anymore because it's actually everybody's all singing from the same sheet of music.
Yeah, and speaking of alignment, that's also an interesting piece because the other part, some of the sessions I had at Explore and a lot of the customer sessions I was focused on was also this new initiative that was actually announced as one of the Explore announcements, called the Private Cloud Modernization Program. And under this program, there's a number of different elements. And one of the elements that I'm a part of and helping driving is this private cloud maturity model. And the premise there is that this is something that customers have been asking us a lot about, right? Is sort of like, here's where I'm at today. Help me help me get to a modern private cloud. What does that actually look like? And so that was one of the breakouts that we had, was talking about how we developed this maturity model program. And part of that includes an assessment that helps customers understand where they at today, not just on the technology front, but also the people and process. And so I mentioned earlier, Chris Prasad kind of talked about in his session, there's these three transformations, right? One obviously is VMware going through its transformation. One of it's our product transformation. The third one's actually our customers. And what I found was really interesting and insightful, was that the private cloud maturity model has these series of questions, right? There's a lot of reading. And so we actually set up a bunch of customer meetings. We weren't sure what we were going to get out of it. And we had practitioners, operators, VP of engineering. We even had a CTO come in and sit down. And we kind of talked about this program, and especially around the cloud maturity assessment. And we asked different types of questions, because there's different personas that get asked. And so things like security, compliance, availability of the infrastructure. And it was really enlightening because even within the team for some of the customers, they didn't all necessarily have the same feedback or response to the answers, because you kind of had like a 1 to 5, right? So an example would be, how's your level of serviceability of services that you deliver to your end customers? How do you convey value from that, right? So from something to like no communication to, hey, I have communication, convey that, demonstrate and all that, right? And so a lot of this sort of assessment of where they're at. And what was really insightful was that in many cases, even within the team, they may or may not have the same understanding. But more importantly, it's like there's a different perception of the infrastructure team in terms of what they're delivering, what they're enabling, what capabilities they have, compared to sort of outside of that, different functional lines of businesses, or maybe even their leadership, where they're in the room debating. They're like, well, do we actually have this level of availability? Do we actually need this level of availability? Or wait, I thought we had that level of availability. What do you mean the infrastructure cannot? Or I thought we had self-service, right? And so the point of this assessment was really to be open to the customers and really getting everybody on the same page. And what we found out from the dozen plus customer meetings I had was all these customers I mean, we're at VMware Explore. This is like technical conference. I'm a technical person. We weren't sure how this was going to get taken, but we had fantastic conversation. Every question had some discussion, debate, and ultimately the realization that it's not just the technology that needs to be there, but there needs to be common vision. And we need to have all these different domains, security, compliance, your application team, all understanding where you're at and truly being honest about it. And then only then can you decide what is the North Star, right? So this is, again, a new program. This is really an investment, based on feedback from our customers, that we announced at Explore. And this is something that folks can take advantage of. And so we have different ways of engaging with our team. If you're a VCF customer that either recently purchased or renewed, you can qualify for a program called Jumpstart that basically uses the cloud maturity model as a starting point. And then we'll kind of set up these workshops depending on your needs. And by setting up these sort of smaller meetings, we were able to validate that there's a lot of value in this. In fact, pretty much all the customers say, hey, I would like to go through the full assessment, because obviously we didn't get time to go through the whole thing. But everybody was super engaging. That was the piece that kind of shocked me, because again, it's a technical conference. We literally made people sit down for 45 minutes to read a question and answer questions. And it was really interesting to see just the discussion, the debate. It's like, oh, security, oh yeah, we don't talk to those guys, or oh yeah, we do work with them. Do I really need to be a level 4 or level 5 in terms of my maturity for the continuous availability? What does availability of the application really mean? So to me, that last pillar of change is really our customers also understand that. And if you look at what has transpired in the last few years, we've had COVID, we had obviously a lot of public cloud usage. And I think a lot of people are now realizing that there is a cost to it. There's definitely a place for public cloud, but there's the governance piece of it, certainly around security, sovereignty, and really customers are really looking at what do they need to do. Obviously, our offers have changed, the capabilities, the components that we included in our VCF offer, but also the technology landscape has changed, right? There's this thing called Gen AI that came out of nowhere like last year.
I heard of that.
Yeah. So, and then there's data services, right? And our portfolio has certainly expanded, if you look back the past 4 years, right, to really deliver on a lot of these modern applications. And so I think a lot of organizations really are truly looking at where best to run their workloads. They are reassessing everything else. And I think that statistic that Hawk shared was pretty surprising to me. Like 83% of customers are looking to move their workloads back on-prem. And the customers that we spoke with at Explore said the exact same thing, that they really need to think about how do they modernize their private cloud infrastructure, how do they modernize their practices for the infrastructure team so that they can better deliver rich developer services to their end users, right? Who are now certainly much more demanding. And teams are starting to up-level themselves. So I think leveraging things like the Cloud Maturity Model Program, taking a look at what can be done from a developer standpoint, not just the technologies that can benefit them, but if you look at some of our IaaS services, I would argue that a lot of our practitioners, infrastructure team can actually leverage a lot of these things in terms of how do you deploy a virtual machine using a more modern approach. You can certainly use things like Power CLI, APIs more imperative, but if you look at a lot of the infrastructure, especially influences from public cloud, it's all a lot of desired state, right? Kubernetes-centric resources, and just making it much easier. So I think even the infrastructure team realizes that there are definitely better ways, but of course these things take time. So that's why the cloud maturity model is so important, because it not only focuses on the technical pieces of understanding, but it's also looking at your organization, the strategy, the people and process. And I think that's the piece that really opened up to the practitioners who attended not only our breakout session, but also just these sort of one-on-one sessions, that they realize that these two have to be, in concert together, and that their organization as a whole need to all align on, where are they really
you can't
at today.
buy cloud,
Exactly. And then
you have to
then
do
once
cloud
you know where
too.
you're at, once you know where you're at, where you want to go. And interestingly, when we look at this maturity, we're also doing this with Broadcom IT using the cloud maturity model, which is kind of based on this 1 to 5 leveling. And in many cases, they definitely want to be at a 4. And in cases where we're there at 4, and there's some places where there's still room for improvement. So even we ourselves are going through that same private cloud modernization journey itself. And in fact, I think even Hawk had mentioned this, right? Like if the public cloud truly was cheap and effective for all workloads, he would be there, right? So it kind of goes to say that, you do need to look at your workload and kind of figure it out. But in some cases, some of these assessment parts of it, even Broadcom isn't looking to be a 5, because there's a cost associated behind that, for continuous availability of the application. You really got to work in concert with the application and line of businesses to make sure that you've got that end-to-end availability story, not just on the infrastructure side, but all the way up to the application. And so there's always a cost behind it, right? And so it was definitely interesting. Another great insight that we got was that the types of use cases that we're covering, no surprise, but it was good to kind of get that validation. The number one use case was having a modernized infrastructure with modern practices. And then the second use case was taking that as foundation. How do I then deliver a modern self-service, the delivery of capabilities, functionality to the end customers, right? That was not a surprise at all. But those were kind of the two. And then we did speak with some FSI customers who took ransomware and DR as their kind of P0, primarily because what they shared was like, hey, CrowdStrike was certainly, for them was an attack. And we will see these types of things in the future, and they definitely want to be more proactive about that. So it's really great to see certain segments and verticals really understand that these things are going to come again. How can we leverage VMware technology so that we can truly be proactive? But if you put that aside, the use cases are there, right? It's like, I want to have modern infrastructure. How do I have that modern practice? And then how do I take that and deliver that, right? So it's really great to see that understanding from our users. And then at the end of the day, there are all these different programs, whether it's, our new VCF certification program, the free training and learning that's just there out of the box, or even things like the cloud maturity model program, right? These are all things that we're investing in. I think a lot of customers were quoting us saying like, hey, you guys are on a for profit. You're not a cost center anymore. And so it was really great for them to be able to replay that. And it's funny because they're telling that to us, right? It's like, yeah, exactly. And so this investment, right, is really done at cost so that we can really help them get the value of the software that they're purchasing from us. And ultimately, that's the investment that they put into us. So I think that's really us trying to return that back to them and really ultimately helping them succeed. And that's really the bar that we're grading ourselves on. So.
No, I like that shift on services mindset to making sure we get the outcome and not it just be another P&L in the business. But it's something that being able to benchmark yourself is very difficult. Being able to understand, especially, it's good to have people who have a lot of tenure with an org, but if you haven't kind of been around and seen that, that's one of the benefit again of, getting back to topic of this podcast. One of the benefits of going to a real in-person event is to go talk to people and benchmark, where you're successful, talk to other, not just the sessions, but, hear from the speakers, talk to other people at lunch and say, hey, what are you guys doing? What are you guys doing for cert management? Or how are you handling patches? Or, what are your requirements are? And if you're in a specific industry and you're coming to this conference, reach out to your account team and say, hey, is there anybody else in healthcare, telecom, whatever that field is, can we get a side group going, or are there any specific sessions targeted at us that we can learn, what everybody's up to, so to speak?
Yeah, I think I saw some internal recap. There was like 500 meeting things that happened over the period of 3 or 4 days. So lots of meetings happened in Las Vegas for sure, and I'm sure it's going to be the same in Barcelona. But yeah, the other thing is there were a ton of great sessions. Every session I think was recorded. And so, yeah, they're available online. There's a QR code there if you want to go and watch some of the replays. Yeah, and I would highly recommend watching the general session. I thought the VCF keynote session where William did the demos was probably one of my favorite sessions of the larger sessions, because it just honestly because William was there and I like to see William, but also because he did some cool demos. Yeah, so lots of good content there. John and I were also on the scene recording many a interview with various folks. If you subscribe to the podcast, you've probably seen them trickling in, both on the audio version on our main site at vSpeaking, but also if you go to the VCF YouTube channel, there's a full playlist of all of the episodes there. So be sure to check those out as well. But yeah, gentlemen, any other thoughts about any takeaways from this year at Explore before we take off?
My main takeaway is this was just a conference to go and learn. Like there was a lot of people there. The sessions were the catalog was very technical focused. This was not, I didn't feel like this was focused on, high level marketing, splashy stuff. There was a lot of good operations. The questions were unbelievably good this year. I generally kind of, say that the Europeans have better questions and are much more technical focused. The American are a little more, marketing and business focused, but it almost felt like a European conference, I would say. Like I was getting much more like, how am I going to execute on this stuff? Seemed to be the focus. So.
Yeah, I would agree with John. A lot of great questions, a lot of great engagements, a lot of optimism, honestly. I
Yeah.
think I think a lot of folks going there, they weren't sure what they were going to kind of see and get. And I would say that this definitely felt, like the old days of VMworld. super technical sessions. I've talked to a number of folks, just in passing, and they really enjoyed the conversations, talking to our product teams. And it being a more intimate conference, I think that actually helped as well because they were able to really sit down. You certainly didn't have lines and lines to get into the breakouts, and so I think people were certainly happy. Don't get me wrong; there were still some sessions that people still couldn't get in, so I think we can still always improve upon that. But I think there was definitely a lot of optimism around what VMware is trying to do, and ultimately it's for us to kind of prove to our customers and really help them. But I think they really like the message, and honestly, some of the bluntness that you might have seen from the general session. Um, I mean, Hawks knows how to do these things, right? And so I think he really was telling it the way it is, and I think customers really appreciated that transparency. And I think a lot of them have commented that they felt this was a more real conference than maybe past years, where maybe we would kind of showcase more fluff or marketing, whatever it may be, right? I just felt like it was definitely well received from my point of view.
Yeah, I'll echo that, and I will say that the one thing I heard from more than one person was that we seem more focused than ever before, and that's a good thing. So I agree. I think when everybody's I said earlier, singing from the same page of music, when everybody's focused on the same thing, we can do great things. So my takeaway was, yeah, it was a lot of good technical questions, a lot of good customer conversations. Everybody came in, I feel like, looking left and right, trying to see what exactly was going to happen with VMware post Broadcom acquisition. And I think this was the first real event where people were trying to, see exactly where we were. But I think at the end of it, I think everybody left, assured. And yeah, I think it's going to be only up from here. But yeah, all right, gentlemen, very good. I don't want to take too much of your time, William. I know you're a busy man. I want to thank you for joining us on Virtually Speaking. And hey, we'll do this again in a couple of weeks in Vegas. If you missed in Barcelona, if you missed the Las Vegas Explore, you've got a chance to come to VMware Explore Barcelona, happening November 4th through the 7th. And John and I will also be there handing out, lots of lovely vSpeaking swag and interviewing customers, partners, and anybody with a good story. So we hope to see you there. But until then, bye for now.